Around 1901, there's this guy, Alma O. Taylor, who goes on a mission. He's just a regular young missionary. He's 19. Goes on a mission to Japan, and he picks up Japanese really quickly and starts translating all these church materials into Japanese, right? And through this process, he became more and more confident, and people started to think, well, maybe he could translate the Book of Mormon into Japanese, right? And so he's doing this translation, and the mission president is really feeling like, yeah, we really should actually get somebody to translate the Book of Mormon into Japanese. And so they pick Alma to do it and actually assign him and set him apart to translate the Book of Mormon into Japanese. So he goes through and he makes this translation, but then he has a problem. He realizes he just can't do this by himself, so he gets other missionaries and other Latter-day Saints to help him, but that ends up not being good enough, and he has to go actually to non-Latter-day Saint Japanese scholars to help him. So people that have no knowledge of the Book of Mormon and not members of the church are helping him translate the Book of Mormon. And when he gave them the manuscript, a lot of these guys looked at it and said, well, this is fine. But then when he got the manuscript back, it was not in the kind of Japanese he was writing in. He was writing in sort of colloquial Japanese from the region that he was from, that he was serving in. And these guys were writing in classical Japanese. And they said, yeah, I mean, if you take this Japanese that you wrote it in and read it in almost any other part of Japan, people aren't going to know what you're saying. It actually has to be in this classical Japanese. And so they updated it to the classical Japanese. But then he had the problem that it was like not really readable, right? And so then he had to go get all these other people to help him. And he looked and looked and looked for a long time. And he thought he had somebody that was helping him for a long time. Turns out the guy was actually just taking him for a ride and was scamming him, pretending he was working when really he wasn't. So they had to find somebody else, and finally, he finds somebody that can help him translate the whole Book of Mormon into the kind of Japanese that it needed to be translated into. But this is a pretty long process. He starts it in early 1903, and it takes a very long time for him to finally find the right people, find somebody that's not going to scam him, and get the whole Book of Mormon translated into Japanese with the help of these non-Latter-day Saint Japanese scholars. His journal entries are very interesting, and we actually have his journals. You can read them online. We link to them in the Knowhy, bookofmormoncentral.org. But his experience was interesting because you can sort of see the anguish as he's sort of realizing that he's overwhelmed, that he can't do it by himself, right? And then you see the pain of trying to find the right person, and you see the ups and downs of thinking, oh, I got somebody, no, that guy didn't work out, and so you see the range of his emotions in his journal entries, of the excitement of thinking you found somebody, and then the crash of realizing that the person was not going to help him, or not going to be any use to him, right? And you see sort of the roller coaster of emotions that is trying to get the Book of Mormon translated into Japanese. So it's interesting to see that in his own words in his journals. When you look at the end of the process, when you look at his journals, you really get a sense of relief from him, of finally, after all this struggle, things worked out. God helped him, and things worked out in the end, right? And you get that, you really feel his relief when you read his journals of finally having it done, right? And I think that is sort of valuable for us to see that, of going through this really hard process, struggling to get this thing done, and then finding the relief of knowing that God helped you through it and that everything was okay. I think if Alma had the future and could look at his journal entries for the end of the process, if he'd had those during the middle of the process, he would have been a much happier guy, right? Because he would have been able to read that and feel his own relief of having this project done. And for us, it's nice to remember that when we're in the middle of something, when we're in the throes of something really hard, to remember that it's going to be over, and there's going to be that beautiful sense of relief that God really did help us after all, and that it was okay. And that's what you get at the end of his journal entries on this.